And welcome to Project Natter. This is Stop the Boats Part 4. Joining me in this video is London-based activist and former UKIP leader Richard Braine, alongside Swindon activist and former Brexit Party candidate Martin Costello. But before we get started, if this is your first time here, please show your support for freedom of speech by hitting that subscribe button. I get heavily censored by the lefties and taken out of suggested videos. Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Good to see you, David. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Good to see Martin as well. Always good to see you as well.
I still owe you a pint, Richard, I think.
Oh, good. I look forward to that.
Right, guys. So this is Stop the Boats Part 4. So just want to touch on what's been going on recently. We're seeing these boats now coming over, night and day. They've been coming over. We knew it would happen. We said it would happen. Once the first few boats were allowed to come in, or were chaperoned in, we knew the rest of them would start coming over. We see the situation now with the hotels and that. Richard, what have you made of it all?
Well, I think I've made of it what most people I've spoken to seem to have made of it, which is that it is a disgrace. We don't know who's coming in. Apparently, very high numbers of them are infected with COVID. We don't know how many of them have come from an ISIS training camp. There's all this fuss about, they're refugees. They're coming from France. I mean, I go to France on holiday. It's a civilized country. This is not a war-torn torture chamber. It's France. And France has got a pretty serious welfare state. And it's quite a socialist country, and so the idea that they are political refugees from France is absolute nonsense. So these people are not refugees; they are not asylum seekers. They are welfare tourists. They're coming here because they reckon they've got a better welfare deal here, because their mate sent them a message on WhatsApp saying, "Look at my hotel room. It's bloody 4-star here, mate. Come on, get over here. You want some of this?" And that, I'm afraid to say, is a big part of it. And we know this is the case from other patterns across the Mediterranean, a $32 billion business as it was a couple of years ago, black market, helped along by NGOs. And the real question is this. I mean, I always understood that Boris Johnson was, a pro-mass migration Tory. But today he revealed something when he talked about this banning of the words of "Land of Hope and Glory" at the last night of the proms, because he said they're restraining me. I think the words he used were they're restraining me from speaking about this. And the question is, who is they? Who is it that actually controls our prime minister? Who does he really answer to? Because it's not the British public. That's quite obvious now. Because I think it's pretty obvious to anyone going online and looking at the comments anywhere under any of the newspapers that generally the British people are not happy with large-scale illegal immigration into this country by people. The very first thing they do coming to this country is a criminal act, and that's so people are not happy about this. Boris Johnson is doing nothing about it. Priti Patel's paid lip service to it, but done nothing at all. And so the question is, who does Johnson actually answer to? It's very difficult to answer that question. Presumably, it's some group of people that have supranational power and that wish to see large-scale migration continue. And that's about all we know about them. And Johnson referred to them as they. He didn't say who. He didn't give any names. He didn't actually indicate the people that he answers to. He simply referred to them mysteriously. And that's it. That's all we know.
Now you touched on there about the welfare. So we know when they come over, they're getting the accommodation is paid for them. They're in proper 4-star hotels. Meanwhile, we've got British veterans sleeping on our street. It's estimated around 7,000 British veterans are homeless and they're on the streets. And yet we're taking economic migrants, because that's what they are. They're not refugees, economic migrants being put up in these 4-star hotels, are being housed and fed and are receiving benefits. The benefit system was set up for Brits. If you fall on hard times, you paid into that system, you get something back. Martin, what have you made of all these hotels? We've seen the videos up and down the country with various different activists, highlighting what's been going on. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's the way that they're actually picking them up from Dover and ferrying them off to these places is just makes a mockery of the whole thing. But it's very interesting to see that some people are making a lot of money out of this. And, as we've seen, there was actually a clip yesterday, another hotel just completely filled with migrants. The local councillor didn't even know about it, just closed them down. We've seen big companies like Serco making £3 billion contracts out of this. And this is Robert Soms, grandson of Winston Churchill. There's a lot of shady deals going on here and a lot of people making money. People are saying that these people are starting to keep the hotel industry up. Well, if that's the case, then maybe we can keep the airline industry up and fly them all back. That's what I think about it.
It's Nicholas Soames, I think, isn't it? Isn't he the chairman
Nicholas
of Serco? And Churchill's grandson, and presumably a Bilderberger type character. And yes, the Serco contract is enormous, and don't forget, that's taxpayers' money. That's our money being paid to Serco so that Serco can pay hotel bills to put up illegal migrants in this country who, frankly, the way things have been going for a long time, there's little hope that any of them will be returned to France, where they've escaped from daringly. And so, yeah, that's a big problem. The Tories are, senior people, very senior people in the Tory party are making big bucks out of this.
Rupert Soms is his name, and he was a member of the Bullingdon Club. And you mentioned a group of people earlier.
Isn't it Soames? Isn't it Nicholas Soames?
The actual CEO of Serco is Rupert. Oh,
is it? Okay.
But you touched on there with that. If you look at we always refer these uncontrolled immigration and pro-migration with the lefties. And Richard, you said to me a while ago when the Conservatives, when they were voted in, and I mentioned to you about them being right wing, and you said to me, "Do you really think they're right wing? Then they're not right wing." And this wouldn't be happening if it was a right wing government. If it was under Conservative power, we wouldn't have uncontrolled immigration. We wouldn't have these boats coming over. And the thing here for me that's shocking is, like I said, we've got all these homeless veterans on our streets, estimated around 7,000. We've got so many families here that are in temporary accommodation and probably never get out of temporary accommodation. And some of these temporary accommodations, and I've been in them myself when I was a kid, they're complete shitholes. And it's an insult to British citizens when you see them put up in these 4-star hotels. And the biggest thing for me is you see the left, they've never met a refugee they didn't want to accept. But where are all these people going to live? We were talking before this, Martin, and we were saying that, we have to build a city the size of Birmingham like every 10 years. What kind of impact is this going to have on our infrastructure? Look at you live in London, Richard. You've seen what the tubes are like. I know COVID has stopped people from going out, but it's rammed. It's rammed on the tubes. It's rammed on the buses. As it is. Parking's a joke, and driving in central London, you're going to get. So where are these people going to live? As far as you can see, there's skyscrapers popping up all over London. We're living like battery chickens, all squashed in amongst each other. Where are these people going to live? And how much energy are they going to use? All these climate change activists are all pro-refugee, but how much energy are these migrants going to use?
Well, the other thing is the all of the other associated costs, to do with education and health and prisons and policing and all around London, as I understand it, there's people living 6 or 8 in a room who've got here, but there isn't enough housing. And there's also the sort of war of attrition against British culture, which continues apace, and everybody's allowed to champion every kind of culture except for British culture. and we're just seeing that with the proms. But that's just the tip of an iceberg, really. You know, on Twitter or YouTube, every day you find ordinary British people being abused for one reason or another, often because of their race. And we see that white people are the least likely to get accepted into higher education in the UK now. And you know, so I think that you know, culturally we're heading towards the sort of situation that you saw in you know, we're not there yet, but clearly the direction is the situation you saw in the United States with the Native Americans, First Nation Americans they're called now, where slowly, you know, these people were pushed back into the hinterland and then into reservations, and you know, a kind of cultural attrition occurred against them, and they've ended up people and gambling, and you know, this, you know, it hasn't been a happy story for them, and the population of them, I don't think has grown in the way that the rest of the US population has grown. And so, you know, I'm not saying that we're yet at the stage where, you know, we're last of the Mohicans, but the cultural and ethnic warfare against the British and Britishness in general continues apace. And increasingly, we're supposed to feel guilty about being white and British, and we're apparently all slave owners and all of this sort of stuff. And so there's the cost of that as well, because that's going to lead to very serious divisions. We're already seeing very serious divisions, and we're seeing a real cultural divide and you know, opening up. And in fact, there's plenty of great immigrants in this country who are on let's say the conservative side of this, and really are proud of their Britishness and proud of being British, and are up in arms about you know, the cancellation of the words of Land and Hope and Glory at the proms, and don't believe in that at all. And you know, they are being you know, treated quite unfairly by, you know, the Black Lives Matter, Hope Not Hate, Antifa, you know, and the Labour Party and the Momentum and the left and all of that. They're being treated extremely unpleasantly by them for being traitors to their colour. You ain't black, is what Biden said. Hayden Biden. You ain't black if you ain't on our side of extreme left-wingery here. So there's a massive cultural divide, a political divide opening up here as a result of this. And to a great extent, immigrants are being, I suppose, cajoled and coerced and bullied into being on the extreme left side of it. So there's a world of trouble being stored up, and we all know that people have got in trouble before for making speeches about that. I won't mention the unspeakable person's name, obviously, but you know, that is the situation. We're seeing it every day now, and something's got to be done. But how? Because the Tories have a monopoly now. They have emasculated Labour. Labour right now are a laughingstock. Where's Keir Starmer? What's he got to say about the proms, and what's he got to say about the welfare tourists coming across the channel and the hotels housing hundreds of illegal immigrants? What's he got to say about that? Nothing. You know, he hasn't contributed anything at all. He's gone.
I think that's a given with all the parties. I don't think there's a single mainstream party out there that's got a plan for all the numbers. There's not a single party out there saying, you know, they've got a plan for the numbers, the amount of people they're bringing in. And what you're saying there, you bang on, because we see what the left are doing is they're weaponizing people from the Braine background, you know, and they're using it, and they've weaponized them now. And there are so many positions we've discussed this before, Martin, with jobs and stuff like that, where you can't apply for you can only apply for if you're from a Braine background. So you're excluded if you're white. Now, white Brits are a minority in London and in Birmingham. So if there was a job that was for Braine background in London, even though I'm a minority in London, I can't apply for those jobs. It's absolutely. I just can't believe the way the country's heading. It doesn't seem like there's anybody out there who's going to slam their foot on the brakes, so to speak. Farage seems to be in and out of politics. UKIP have gone flat, as you know, Richard, and yourself, Martin. Martin, you still a member of the Brexit Party? Is there anything from the Brexit Party about all this?
There's lots of talk, of course. I mean, immigration is probably the biggest subject that this country's faced for a while, but it just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? We know probably that was one of the main reasons people voted to leave as well, even though there are many more greater reasons. But we've heard the Tories in the past say, oh, they get down these numbers down to tens of thousands, but it never happens, does it? It's like with Boris. He did start me off with such great hope with like the Brexit trade deals, but he seems to be letting us down. I mean, if you can't keep your border secure, then that is the most worrying thing at all. Because as Richard spoke about earlier, we could potentially have a lot of battalions of ISIS sleeper cells coming in. We have absolutely no idea who these people are. And there's, like I said, there's about 80% of these people coming on the dinghies are between 18 and 26 years old. You know, they're fighting male age. Why aren't they going back defending their own countries? These people have got no reason to be here. They've passed through so many different countries of safety, yet they're pouring over here. And Boris seems to be allowing this to happen in. The same with Priti Patel as well. The Navy should have been in a long time ago to stop this. And the fact that these people still coming over, we don't know how many have actually, well, they say 5,000, up to 5,000 this year already have already made it over here. But again, we don't know how many have perhaps perished on the way or have made it across and just disappeared. There's a big problem here. They even know in London, actually, there's probably about 1 million legal people living there, and they can tell that from the way the sewage system works. It's quite bizarre. So we're very scared.
There, Martin, you know, you've hit the nail on the head. And the thing is, we don't know the numbers. We don't know exactly how many people have come in. You know, we've been told 5,000, and you know, we see a few boats come in. What about the boats that we don't see? You know, what about the big they hit the coastlines that we don't see and then get brought in? You know, we saw last year with that lorry that came across. You know, unfortunately, those people died. But it gave us that was the tip of the iceberg, showing us how bad this.
Don't forget that, you know, we're getting distracted by the channel, but the numbers coming across the channel are probably dwarfed by the numbers of people simply flying into Britain, you know, ostensibly for a holiday or with some sort of short visa or whatever, who never leave. And the way, as I understand it, the government assesses that is they send a chap with a clipboard to the main airports a few days a year, and he stands there from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. and asks people if they intend to stay for longer than 6 months as they come through. So this is a deliberately inadequate way of calculating and monitoring how many people are entering this country and never leaving. And I think that is policy. And we know that the national insurance numbers give the game away, because the number of national insurance numbers issued absolutely dwarfs the number of people who are supposedly entering the country. So the immigration figures are a complete falsity, clearly quite deliberately, and they go on and on about the net immigration figure. But in fact, I think it's more important to understand what scale of people is coming into this country and not leaving. People from abroad, you know, who have never paid into the system, don't have any particular right or reason to be here, except that they want to take advantage of you know, the commonwealth of the British people, and so, you know, the cost of that again is enormous, and the supermarkets reckon, as I understand it, that there are getting on for sort of 80 million people in this country. The government figures are 66 million, and that's a big discrepancy. You know, that's whatever it is, 14 million. Well, you know, where the truth is somewhere in there. But exactly. But the real problem, and I talked of this when I was UKIP leader last year, that what we really need to have is a system where every single visitor to this country who is not a British citizen gives you know, has an iris photograph and a DNA sample and is on a database of visitors. And the reason why that's important is that you haven't impinged on the privacy or identity of British citizens if you do that. You've simply said, look, if you want to visit our country, one of the requirements is that we have to be able to identify you in the future, even when you've had a nice haircut. And And so we're going to have a database that we can actually identify you. And if we could do that, then at least we would have the information to know when we came across someone through the welfare system, or perhaps who was involved in crime through the court system, for instance, to be able to say, hang on, this person actually came in on a 3-month visa or a 6-month visa, whatever it was, and it's now, that was 3 years ago, and he's not even meant to be here. At least we would have that information. But it seems to me now almost no effort is being made to actually even properly monitor how many people are coming here from all around the world. And there are 3.5 billion people, as I keep saying, in the world who earn less than £2 a day. And the UN Global Compact on Immigration commits us, signed by Theresa May, no less, commits us to accepting that every person in the world has a right to come here. And this country can't cope with it. England is the 4th most densely populated country in the world. And it's about time people started going somewhere else, because we can't cope anymore.
A few years ago, I was working as a warrant officer for a Majesty's Court Service. I used to execute warrants of arrest in the early hours of the morning, mostly over East London. So a lot of the names on there were from ethnic countries. They weren't what you would call British names. And we look for certain people from most Pakistani background or Bangladesh, which was over there. It's predominantly populated by people from those countries. And I remember one property we turned up at. Must have been about 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. I went into this property, and there was about 30 people sleeping in this house. And I mean, it was a 2-bedroom property, 3-bedroom property, if that. They were sleeping like on the floors in the front room, the bedroom. I asked where this guy was. I showed a picture of this guy. I said who we were looking for. We had a warrant for his arrest. They pointed me to this bedroom, said blah blah. Opened the bedroom. There's 2 beds in there, 2 single beds. The chap was in there, woke him up. Wasn't the chap that we were looking for. He actually shared a bed with the fellow that we were looking for, and he worked nights and the others worked days, and they would switch and stay, and in the same bed. But this was a real eye opener for me, showing me how bad the problem was. Whilst I was over there, I couldn't believe my eyes. But from what you've seen so far, what do you make, Martin, of the way the Home Secretary's dealt with things? I mean, it just seems it's all talk. Nothing happening. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to do that." But nothing seems to happen.
Nothing seems to happen. And you touched on there that interesting story about what you saw back in London. This is what I fear is going to happen across the country, because what we've got of all these houses buying up with buy-to-let landlords, and they're literally buying them up and just shoving people in there and having that rotary system of people sleeping on mattresses on the floor. And that's why I believe that, the people in power, they encourage mass immigration for basically slave labour. They think there's at least 13,000 people working under slavery conditions in this country already. It's interesting, like Black Lives Matter and groups like that don't talk about these things, the slavery on our own, underneath our own noses. But I have no faith whatsoever in our current government now to sort this out. That should have been done straight away. And if they had any interest in doing it, they would have done it. But we know it doesn't affect them personally. If they come from like an average town, they would see what's going on in this country. We're witnessing the colonization of areas with different cultures that have absolutely no interest whatsoever with integrating with anyone else. And this is the balkanization that we've seen in other countries, and it's failed. It's this, and I think there's going to be a lot of problems in the future if they don't get a grip on this.
Richard, what do you make of the situation? Can you see a solution? Can you see? I mean, what do you think has to be done? Because at the minute we're in a whirlwind. We're stuck in limbo. What's the solution here? What do you think what can be done? What can we do?
Well, when it comes to the issue of people coming across the channel dangerously and unnecessarily from one of the safest countries in the world, let's not forget, I think there is a solution, and it is this: you simply use old cruise ships, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and frankly, like Dunkirk, anybody else who's willing to help. And I think you'll find there's plenty of boat owners in the south of England who are willing to help, actually, to collect these migrant boats and embarked them onto a big cruiser, and shipped them down to South Georgia in the South Atlantic, which is British. It has a permanent population of about 30 people. The armed forces could very easily build in no time at all suitable living conditions there. You know, a hangar and a place to live down there. That could be done pretty quickly, and so you could have, and this is basically what Australia did to solve the problem. So you could have a clearance or a processing center for applications to enter Britain down there, and you could look at each of the people and actually try to get somewhere with it. But the default would have to be that without pretty conclusive proof that the person was in serious danger in France from the French government, their case would have to be rejected, and they should be returned to France. But it may be that France won't be willing to take them, having helped them on their way over here. So very likely they might have to spend some time down in South Georgia, and I understand it's quite nice in the summer. It's pretty far south. The winter's pretty bleak, and I think that those people down there would take some time to think about, where they wanted to go and whether they wanted to go back to France. I mean, in that situation, I think that very, very quickly the boats would stop. Once people saw that we weren't a pushover, they weren't going to get slung straight in a 4-star hotel, given spending money, tours of Liverpool Football Club, and presumably a porn channel on the hotel TV. Once they understood that's no longer an option, I think you find the boats would stop, because France just isn't that bad. So that's an actual solution to the problem. Can you do it? Well, I'm certain once we leave the EU, we can do it. I'm frankly pretty sure you could do it now, because South Georgia is British, and I don't think you'd have any problems really in terms of jurisdiction. So I don't see why it couldn't and shouldn't be done now. Of course, the real problem is this. The Tories want, for the sake of their big business chums and Serco and what have you, this unlimited flow of very cheap labour. The Labour think that they get votes out of immigrants, so they support it. So the real problem is not that it can't be solved in practical terms. The problem is that we've got no politicians in this country who have any incentive to solve this at all, because our politicians in this country are actually incentivized or ideologically driven to destroy this country. In the case of Labour, they're driven by bogus pseudo-scientific Marxist ideology that has never worked, that has led to hundreds of millions of deaths. In the case of the Tories, they simply serve the highest bidder, big business bidders, and again, bogus economic theory taught to them on their PPE course at Oxford, where things like culture and history and fraternity have absolutely no economic value or presence in any theory at all, and so there's just no political body or authority in this country that's going to solve this.
The trouble is, Richard, whenever there has been a party that stood up and said, "Hey, hello, we'll deal with that," no one's had the balls to vote for them. You had UKIP, and then people were saying, "Oh no, they've split the vote." Then you had Nigel Farage form the Brexit Party, and it was the same story. "Oh no, it will split the vote." So the parties have come out and said that they would deal with the situation, but it just seems that Britain's lost its backbone. Basically, no one's got a pair of bollocks anymore. They're just too shit scared to vote for the party that's going to deal with it, because they're worried about splitting the vote and ending up with Labour. Because God forbid, I mean, the lesser of two evils is the Conservative Party. I mean, nobody wants to be the Labour Party in power, do they? Martin, do you still hear a lot from the Brexit Party on what's going on at the moment, or in general, anything?
There's a lot of things bubbling over, but you're absolutely right, though. People in this country don't have the vote don't have the bottle to vote the right way. It absolutely sickens me. You think 80 years ago, people shed their blood on those beaches of Normandy, and they don't even have the backbone or the balls to actually put a cross and to vote for what they believe in, which is what they should do, not to pick the best out of two lesser evils. That's not good enough. You know, people fought and died for this country, and if they can't vote for something that would protect our borders and our culture and our heritage and our way of life, then, you know, it makes you wonder whether they deserve to have the vote in the first place, to be quite honest.
It was my father's 96th birthday yesterday.
Wow.
And
Happy birthday to your father.
you know, he is getting on, and there's no question that he is deteriorating, and he has a tendency to fall over backwards and all that sort of thing. But I had lots of good chats with him about his time in the Navy and D-Day and North Russia and you know, the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and the Far East, and he was everywhere. You know, North Africa, everything. You know, he saw it all, and it's just mind-boggling for me when I talk to him about the world back then and about how half his class at Dartmouth didn't make it, and you know what they, you know, from the age of 17 until the age of 23 or so, he really just lived on a destroyer or a battleship. He had no other life, and you know, they would come into Scapa Flow from the North Atlantic, and they would refuel, and they would leave again in half an hour. And
Wow.
that was his life for, you know, 7 years, 6 years, 7 years. And, you know, from the age of 17 as well. And I think what I did from the age of 17 till 23, you know, and I was pretty dissolute. I mean, I did get a degree, but I did also spend quite a lot of time in the pub and going to gigs. And though I had one or two girlfriends, and, you know, I had the kind of life that, you know, I suppose a 17 to 23-year-old person takes for granted these days. But to chat to him and understand, you know, how severe that crisis was, how appalling that war was, how many people were genuine refugees, genuinely fleeing for their lives, genuinely in peril.
What does he make of today, Richard? Is he what does he make, you know, fighting in that war and stuff, and then seeing how it is today? Has he made any comment about that, or would you rather not say? Or
he no, I'm happy to say. I mean, generally he has a pretty sort of central conservative point of view. He's a Tory voter and a Tory supporter, and in the end, after much discussion, he did also vote Leave. Which was a great triumph for me to persuade him. My mother was on side all the way, but my father had a few doubts, obviously, because all the project fear and that sort of stuff. But so, you know, what does he make of it? Not very much. I mean, his opinions come from the BBC and the Times, and, you know, pretty standard mainstream information and news networks. And I think that I think that he sees a very different world to the world I see. I think he sees the world that the BBC wants to show him, whereas I don't, and I don't even have a television. And as far as I'm concerned, the BBC can do one, and that's it. So I think we see different worlds. I did buy him for his birthday present, his 96th birthday. I went down the bookie and I bought him a bet on Donald Trump winning in November. So he's got a little flutter, and back at the beginning of Trump's administration, he was pretty skeptical about Trump. In fact, very negative, mainly because of simply, you know, echoing what the mainstream media were saying. Whereas now, both my parents have come around a bit and realized that, you know, there's a lot more to it than that, and I think they understand a bit better what's really at stake. And so he's got his betting slip from Betfair or whatever it is to go on whatever it is, November the 6th. Is it? I can't remember the date exactly. Something like that. To really? Go pick up his money when President Trump is re-elected.
I may even have a little dabble myself. I put a couple of quid on Sean Bailey before the lockdown happened. I had a couple £100 on him, and then when lockdown happened and the election got postponed, it got me money back. But the odds were 20 to 1, and they've dropped now to 5 to 1. But, you know, wishful thinking. Martin, so solution-wise, with these hotels, now we've seen our government we just said they've housed all these migrants.
Yeah.
In five-star, four-star hotels or whatever. Why can't they do that? Why can't they do that for our own citizens?
Well, exactly. But that's where the problem stems from, though. When you've got these people coming over and getting shoved into hotels, and then they're sending texts and all these pictures back, these luxurious rooms they got back to their mates. That incentive. The people allowing this means they got blood on their hands. Basically, they're encouraging people to come over because anyone would, showing what a great room they got over here. The fact they're doing that is unbelievable, and that needs to be stamped straight out. You've got to cut that incentive out. People who come over here on boats should be denied asylum straight away. It's as simple as that, really. So the first thing we do is cut that incentive out. And certainly stop putting them in hotels, put them in detention centres. We've got to be serious about this because they're free to roam the streets.
As Richard was just saying, I mean, they nicked the idea from UKIP originally, the Conservatives, but it was to have an Australian-style point system. But Australia, it's funny how we have to follow suit from Australia to deal with immigration. But the irony in that's quite funny. But again, with the Australians, as Richard pointed out, they've got Christmas Island. I was living in Darwin for a couple of years, and a friend of mine worked on one of the islands where they would hold the asylum seekers, and they would kit out. So you have containers, old shipping containers and stuff like that. And what they do is they'll put 4 or 5 of them together. They're bloody big things anyway. The apartment, they'd live in them. But could you imagine that happening here? And we've got asylum seekers in Glasgow going around stabbing people because they've got poor Wi-Fi.
Well, exactly, and that's the problem that we face. And don't forget, we touched on earlier as well. Where on earth are these people supposed to live? Where are they supposed to live? We've got our own housing crisis. Where are they supposed to live? We're supposed to rip up more of a green and pleasant land. When will the lefties actually look at it and think, and put 2 and 2 together and see what the strain is having on our infrastructure? That's one of the big environmental issues about this as well. It's time they looked up to this.
Unemployment levels. I mean, we're going to see a massive recession after this COVID lockdown. We're going to have high unemployment levels, and they want to add to that as well. It's just, I just can't make it out. I just, like Richard said in the beginning when we first started, he was saying about Boris slipping up and saying they, referring to somebody else. It does make you wonder who they is, and is there a bigger picture to all this? Because looking at it from my point of view or our point of view, it doesn't make sense, does it?
Someone's getting very rich.
We know that the UN is one of the forces behind all of this because of Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 and the Global Compact and the OIC. There's so many factors there. So we know that the UN is a big, and I mean, one of the most heartening things that for me during the entire Trump presidency has been was his attitude to the UN and telling them to go stuff it. But we need more of that. And essentially, the UN. The other thing to remember about this is that back in '47, one of my father's very last assignments was to try to stop the disembarkation of large numbers of migrants into Palestine. And after the war, very large numbers of Jewish people were coming from all over the world to sort of settle in Palestine and set up the state of Israel. And the British tried to stop this, or at least keep it within a reasonable scale, but failed. And of course, the UN took over Palestine. And as soon as the UN took over, its very, very, very first assignment when it was created was a dismal failure. It was supposed to keep the peace in Palestine, and immediately war erupted. And essentially, the UN has been failing at pretty much every assignment and every brief it's had ever since. And all it really seems to do is help. I think the OIC have a powerful bloc, and they certainly, I think, are pushing these large-scale migration policies onto the rest of the world. And essentially, those policies are designed or will have the effect, very obviously and certainly, really destroying or having a very deleterious effect on Western civilization and the West, the US and Canada and Europe and so on. So I mean that is one of the culprits, the UN certainly, and I think to survive, the US is going to have to simply exit the UN and tell it to bog off, and we'll go our own way.
One of the things, as you mentioned there, with the UN Global Compact, was making criticism of, or any form of criticism of migration, illegal. So you wouldn't even be able to talk about it in a negative manner. I myself, as you're both aware, have been deleted and removed from Facebook for merely posting stories that are in the news. And I know I now suffering yourself, Martin, from this. If you speak about immigration or anything like that, you get shut down completely. I know a few times you've been banned a lot recently. What have you been banned again, or?
Yeah, I mean, it happens occasionally, but it's just very odd, though. I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't be allowed to criticize these things when it affects our daily lives. People coming to our country, affecting our taxes and things like that. Why can't we talk about this? It's not racist to be able to talk about immigration. As I've always said, immigration is a positive thing, but mass immigration is devastating. And when we see mass immigration, it doesn't allow people to integrate into society properly. And that's why I'm very concerned about all this. We're seeing lots of different cultures together and the colonization of places. And if we can't talk about these issues now and look for more inclusion, then it's just going to bottle up bigger problems in the future. So silencing us is certainly not going to work at all. And we should be free to talk about who comes into our country. And as you say, we fully welcome genuine refugees, but that only makes up 5% of total immigration. So we just need to be sensible about this. But we know it's all money driven. Most of it's just slave labor coming in. And to make it not be able to talk about it makes it very sinister, in my opinion.
It just adds to the arsenal. As I said, the main background has been weaponized. It's nothing more than a weapon, really. It's just used to shut people down, stop people from talking, shutting down free speech on social media platforms. It's got big now, as you mentioned earlier about Donald Trump, Richard. We've seen Donald Trump also been censored by Twitter quite a few times this year. Hopefully he makes a flip and heads over to Parler or another social media channel, and his followers will follow him over there. I think it's the only way we can fight back is to hit them in the pocket. And if they're no longer making billions of dollars, I think they'll soon wake up.
Yeah, well, I hope that's right. I mean, coming back to something, I mean, let's be careful. We're not fugitives yet. Being blocked from a particular social media platform, is not total censure, quite in the way that was seen, let's say, in Soviet Union or Maoist China. But I think a more serious way that people are being attacked and disenfranchised for having the sorts of political views that we have is through loss of livelihood, loss of job. And I mean, I heard today about an ex-UKIPper who shall remain nameless, who is being attacked in the sense that someone's trying to get his employer to sack him. And of course, we've seen that essentially large numbers of people in the media business know very well that they can't express these sorts of opinions because they'll never work again. And we've got a situation where every institution and every employer in this country is now terrified of having anybody on the books who doesn't conform to these, frankly, often quite insane anarcho-Marxist, racial opinions, BLM and all that. And it's, you've got big corporations like Sprite promoting George Floyd and BLM and all of that. And people who work for Sprite presumably know that they're not allowed to express an opinion that, I mean, it could get them sacked if they had the wrong opinion. And often it's not a question of being sacked, it's just a question of being sidelined. So there's no visible trace of this kind of prejudice and this kind of political purge that is going on right now against people who have wrong opinions. Another thing that Mark has talked about, we welcome genuine instruments and a record for that, and we should be proud of it. I mean, you know, for instance, and they were refugees, they were persecuted in France, unlike the people who are coming now. But there's an interesting point here, which is that sometimes such vast refugees in the world, it's impossible for a country this size to hold.
I've lost you there, Richard. You got a bit robotic. You sound like you're in Atlantis.
I think
Sorry,
can
you hear me now?
you haven't been censored, have you?
Yeah, possibly. Can you hear me now?
Just MI5 joining the call.
Right. I'm going to move around a bit. I'll see if I can get a better reception. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you fine now.
You probably can't see me, but because the lights are off. But yeah, one point that Martin raised, I don't know how much of this you heard, but a point that Martin raised was that we welcome refugees. But it's interesting if you look at, let's say, countries like Saudi Arabia, and they don't really welcome refugees. And in fact, many of the refugees that are coming here would be much more comfortable in Saudi Arabia because at least they are, Muslim and culturally, similar in some way, and it would be an easier environment very often. But countries like Saudi Arabia have taken pretty much no refugees at all, as far as I understand it. And so I think we need to be careful of pretending that we can take on the full burden of big international refugee crises. We can't. And I think we've done the right thing recently. I think one thing that the Tories did do right almost over the last couple of years was really try to limit the number of refugees we agreed to take from Syria. But it seems like that was a paper, it hasn't amounted to anything because the numbers actually coming are far greater. But I think that it's fair to say, other countries need to step up and take refugees too. And of course, we have to remember that the refugees should be going to the nearest countries where they're safe.
As part of the Dublin Agreement, they should do. And once they go through country to country, they're no longer refugees. They're economic migrants. And as you touched on there with Black Lives Matter, I don't know if you've seen the video. Martin head down to Swindon Town Centre, and there was a Black Lives Matter protest taking place there, and it was all Marxists. And there was I think they had one black person there who was a speaker, probably a guest speaker. And he went around with the camera and he was talking to them, and he found books on the side to do with Marxism, like Karl Marx. And he was asking, what's Karl Marx got to do with Black lives? Eventually, the police come over. Martin was assaulted. He's now taken it up with the police. So Martin's pretty active out there on the streets. You mentioned before we started, Martin, about heading down to Dover. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that before we finish up?
Yeah, well, I think the next big step really to show our disapproval on the way this is being handled, there's multiple groups actually heading down to Dover on the 5th of September to go down there and guard the borders ourselves. I'm going to make the trip down there, and I think anyone who cares about their country and the way things are going needs to go down there and show their disapproval at this. Because it's gone on too far now. It's beyond a joke. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for our country and our own safety. So people...
If you do go down there, you want to be careful. We see that active catcher. Top respect goes out to him. He's been filming down there on a daily basis, capturing all the boats coming in. He's been filming. He's been arrested a couple of times for breach of the peace. we've seen a migrant trying to escape, and he's filmed them and called the police, and they threatened to arrest him again. So you want to be very careful if you do go down there, because the police are even shutting down the news. We see this week RT were down there trying to interview migrants, and they stopped them from filming as well. So you want to be very careful if you do go down there, because this is a situation that the government do not want to talk about.
That's it. They silenced it, but we need as many people as we can down there. It's so important. Get down on the White Cliffs of Dover and show your support. Stop this from happening.
Down there in his van, you can pick up a few, take them down.
Yeah, I'm ready to do that. The interesting point about this is that if enough people get active in this way, it's difficult to see how, once the government starts having to put away or obstruct hundreds of people or even thousands of people from doing this, I think they will start to get the message and take fright, because they don't want to go down this route into being totalitarian state. We've got to keep the pressure on. The real problem is that we don't, and certainly I think Nigel Farage has done a good job of drawing attention to this, because he's got the profile, and it's good that he's turned himself to this in the last few months. But as action from other issues, in particular the probably larger number of people coming in through other routes, and then of course we've got Brexit, and that's absolutely crucial. And such an important step, and we must not take our eyes off that.
No.
And we've got to watch the Tories very, very carefully, because we know they've got a long track record of promising and promising and promising and delivering nothing.
Well, thanks very much, guys, for coming. That's all we've got time for. I'm going to have to call it a day now. But thanks again. We'll get it out there. We'll no doubt have you both back on soon. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks a lot, David. Really good to chat to you again.
Great chat. Thanks, David.
Cheers, Martin. Good to see you.
Coming on. Cheers, guys.